Hey guys, just wanted to jump on here really quick. I've had a lot of people reach out to me in terms of how they can support what I'm doing. I am doing this full time now, and if you'd like to contribute, if you like and value the work that I'm doing and like to contribute, on every single episode, I have a title "Support My Work." Underneath it, there's a Venmo, Locals, Cash App, or if you prefer not to use one of those methods, you can mail a check or money order to PO Box 25383, Scottsdale, Arizona 85255 9998. So, again, thank you for all the support. Appreciate it and look forward to more conversations ahead. Jim, I had to, I can't let Dave catch you or Matt Bracken, so I had to have a solo conversation with you to, widen the lead, the margin on your appearances. So thanks for
Oh, that's
coming
all
back.
right. It's fun. It's fun being one-on-one. I'll pretend that I'm in some kind of a setup with a Chris Rufo employee who's, trying to trap me into some kind of incriminating statement
What a world we're in, man,
over a
right?
cocktail.
What
Yeah.
what a world we're in right now.
Yeah, I think it has become progressively more kind of immersively psychotic, if we may use that term. Everything now seems absolutely crazy. And my own theory, du jour, would be that it has everything to do with moving up to this inflection point of January 20th when a new government comes in and an awful lot of stuff is going to start kind of blowing up in our cultural and political life. Things that people thought they knew for sure, and a lot of heads are going to be exploding, and yeah, I think it's going to be a wild time. And in expectation of that, I think you're seeing a lot of crazy anxiety-driven behavior.
Well, I also think as well, people they get very comfortable in the internet world versus the reality, and that
Hmm.
seems to be escalating right now. In lieu of everything, you got the certification next week, and then you got the inauguration, and then all the stuff that happened last week with the H-1Bs, H-1B visas, and then Elon dropping the hammer on people on X. And then, you had the New Orleans New Year's Eve and the Cybertruck in front of the Trump Hotel yesterday in Vegas.
Yes, you do. You got all that stuff. I think that the H-1B visa debate was a very healthy thing for America. It was very salutary for the public arena because it got a lot of different opinion out there, and I think the issue was really pretty thoroughly hashed over in a way that allowed people to come to a different conclusion in the end about it, and the different conclusion, which Musk and Trump both came to, was that this is a program which is in need of severe reform. And I think that satisfied just about all parties involved in the debate. And now that the terrorism thing is, kind of jumped into the center ring of our consciousness, we're going to forget about that H-1B visa debate, and that'll be the end of that for a while. And then they'll get, ultimately they'll get around to reforming it and changing the rules. So altogether, that was healthy. A lot of the other stuff that's going on is kind of profoundly worrying, especially the prospect of having a whole lot more kind of terrorist action in the USA.
Yeah, and did you watch Sarah Adams on Sean Ryan?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I didn't see the whole thing, but I did see about 20 minutes of it.
What were your thoughts on what you saw of it?
Well, my thoughts about it was that Sarah Adams, who is some kind of a retired intelligence officer who now runs a kind of a private security company, that she actually does understand the situation pretty well and has a good logical, comprehensive framework for understanding the situation we're in, both at home with the terrorists and other riffraff who have come across the border, and what's going on in other countries, especially the Mid East and near Asia, Afghanistan, Pakistan. She seems to understand that scene overseas pretty well and who all the different players are, the difference between the ISIS and the Hamas and the Hezbollah and, the freelance jihadis and all that. So I found her to be a pretty persuasive voice. And her message was, yeah, we got a lot to worry about. Her message was there are probably something like 1,000 dedicated jihadis on the loose in America who have programming to actually, go into effect at any time. And some of these things are schemes that have already been worked out, and some of them will be kind of, improvisational. They'll go into a mall somewhere and have the choice of either, igniting a bomb, a vest suicide bomb, or just shooting the place up with automatic weapons and stuff like that. So we had kind of a preview of coming attractions with that on New Year's Eve in New Orleans. And we're finding out an awful lot about this guy, but an interesting and bizarre character. A guy who was born in the United States, is a U.S. citizen. He speaks like a Texan. He's got a very kind of pronounced Texas accent. He's sort of like Rooster Cogburn in True Grit, but he's some kind of an Asian chap. Anyway, he was in the army for many years, and didn't just apparently his family didn't even know he was a jihadi. So, are we going to see more of that? Who knows? We got a lot of events coming up, as people have pointed out. On that particular podcast with Sarah, I think they were talking about the upcoming Super Bowl and how people are, that's looking like a remake. That's looking like a possible remake of the movie Black Sunday. Remember that with Bruce Dern from 30 or odd years ago, about a guy who wants to blow up the Super Bowl. So, yeah, pretty anxiety-provoking scene out there.
Well, and the Super Bowl would take place after the inauguration because it's usually in the first or
Right, February.
second week of February.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's the inauguration itself, of course, which, God knows what kind of provisions they have to take. I can't imagine, it's a little hard for me to understand why they would want to have the inauguration on the west front of the Capitol, as they have been doing for, about the last 3 or 4 presidents. They used to do it on the east front of the Capitol. That's the front that faces the Supreme Court building. And in fact, I was there in 1969. Me and my college roommate decided that we had to go to Washington to watch Nixon get inaugurated for the first time in 1969. And it was quite a spectacle. It was really something. But you don't get the same enormous kind of crowd effect that you get from the other side of the Capitol, which faces the mall. So, you can cram 1 million people into the mall. You can't cram that many people into the East Front, which is really basically a parking lot in the street, and then the Supreme Court and the Library of Congress.
So now they moved it to the west, so where they could
Yeah,
put it.
the other side of the building, which has a greater panoramic Western view. And they did that for the first time, I believe, for Reagan, because he was the great Western California figure being inaugurated.
I couldn't even imagine if you're just a regular person trying to go to that thing, what it would take from a parking standpoint. How much you have to walk to get to wherever. I wouldn't want to be anywhere. Would you want to be anywhere near that?
You'd have to park in West Virginia. Well, we did okay in 1969, but that's, like looking at the Middle Ages now, right? I mean, it seems so long ago. We drove a Volkswagen Beetle down there, and somehow we managed. I stayed with my uncle, who at the time was a CIA spook, and they used to bring him back to the United States between administration changeovers. Otherwise, he was posted in Europe most of the time, in Rome and Paris, and he did things like he ran guns to Angola during the revolution, and he was a kind of an African East Asian specialist. But they would bring him back between overseas assignments, and he was living in Maryland in really kind of a beautiful rented villa and in Bethesda. And so we stayed there. There was no metro at the time. I don't know how we got downtown. I think we probably drove and like, you know, parked on 13th Street or something. Who knows?
Did you see
A long
Nixon?
time
Were
ago.
you able to see him?
Oh yeah, we could see Nixon, yeah, and the one of my most vivid memories of that is hearing his voice when he was doing the speech, echoing off of the Library of Congress and the Supreme Court buildings behind me, which were, I don't know what, 1,000 yards between the Capitol building and those two buildings, and he was getting quite an echo effect. And yeah, it was pretty weird. We went there not because we were here, he was our hero. It was more like, oh, you got to see this to believe it. And there it was.
Yeah, I've been fortunate. I've seen three presidents with my own eyes. Never anything like that. But George H.W. Bush. I think I told you this. Came to my hometown in 1992 when he was seeking re-election, and Bruce Willis opened up for him,
Yeah.
which was awesome.
Yeah. I shook hands with Harry Truman once. And I went to a middle school on 76th Street or 75th Street and Third Avenue, and I used to drift out of there after school and like go up to Central Park or something. And Harry Truman used to stay at oh gosh, what's the name of that hotel? The Carlisle Hotel, which is on 75th and Madison, which you would have to sort of go but in the vicinity of on your way to Central Park. And I ran into him walking on the street one day with his retinue of maybe two or three Secret Service guys. And it was easy to recognize him. And I just went up to him and shook his hand and said hello to him. And that was a great moment in sports, I guess.
They let you get that close, so you were able to walk right
Yeah,
up.
yeah. I wasn't wearing any jihad uh, uh, clothing or anything. So there's no reason to be suspicious. I was just a 12-year-old, 13-year-old kid.
Oh yeah, okay, you were a kid. I
It was
always
probably 1961, probably.
I always wondered, and you may or may not know this, like when Abraham Lincoln got assassinated, did
Yeah, I was there. But just kidding. Okay, calm down, Mike.
see Dave should have been here for this moment. Dave would have laughed at Dave would have
The
laughed.
play was really great, though.
Well, what I wonder is, they didn't have when did Secret Service when did that start? And did he have
I think
guards?
what they had back then was the Pinkerton Detective Agency had been hired by the federal government to do certain duties during the Civil War. And one of them, I think, was protection for the president. And they evolved into the Secret Service. But at the time, I think his guards were Pinkertons. And somehow they left his booth at Ford's Theater unguarded. And John Wilkes Booth got in there, and there you have it.
Well, I wonder back then too. You had to have some type of guards around the property all night, I would think, right? Or was it not like that back then? That didn't have to worry.
Well, it was the Civil War had just ended, and there were soldiers garrisoned all in and outside of Washington. Washington was like occupied by the Federal Army, so they were everywhere. I'm sure they had protection around the White House.
Which makes you think, with the CEO of United Healthcare recently getting killed, you'll never see a Fortune 500 CEO walking a public sidewalk again without some type of protection. I would think after
Yeah,
that.
they must be pretty spooked about that. But then again, not every corporation in America is engaged in activities that are so harmful to the citizens of the United States. And by no means do I think that was an excuse to execute the guy. But, it was a hazardous thing to be the CEO of a company that is fucking with people's lives, as they do, by denying them medical care and stuff. So maybe he was a little insouciant about it.
His GoFundMe or whatever is up to over 200 grand. That guy's collected.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah, well, I don't, who knows what kind of benefits his family is going to get from his life insurance, and
No, no, I'm talking
who
about the guy
knows?
that shot him,
Oh,
Mangione.
the assassin?
Yeah, it's over 200 grand the last time I looked.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's a weird kind of combo because you got this guy who, to some extent, he's got these movie star looks that appeal to the young ladies. And on the other hand, he murdered a guy who represents a company that does a lot of things that people are unhappy about. So that's a bad combo. I think we should be realistic and recognize what it amounts to. These are definite things in our culture.
Yeah, and you can see this is where, our society, the breakdown. And I mean, when you have a guy like this that can raise that kind of money and seeing the celebrity or the fame, what will it encourage others to do something similar?
Yeah, who knows about that? I do know that parties or forces out there have confiscated the GoFundMes of many people who did bad things, and then they were not allowed to collect their funds. So I'm not sure that this guy's going to be able to ever collect that. So we'll see what happens.
But you have people that are just in that desperation, I have nothing to lose kind of attitude, and the idea of just the fame.
Yeah.
I could see more of this kind of stuff occurring.
Plus, you have, just a lot of kind of characters like Travis Bickle out of Taxi Driver, Scorsese's movie Taxi Driver, just kind of disordered minds out there who are, free-floating bombs waiting to go off.
With nothing to lose and not even having any regard for their life anymore.
Yeah, or just a very deeply held agenda. Maybe a psychotic agenda, but a deeply held one.
Isn't it amazing a movie like that coming out in the 70s, how it has more impact in today's culture? I feel like.
Um, well, you can view it that way. Having lived through the 70s as an adult, my view is that we were already a pretty deranged society, and he captured something that was already going on. And by the way, we were coming out just then, about 1975, I think it was when the movie came out. We were coming out from a decade of a lot of assassination action. One guy after another getting popped off, and so he was representing Travis Bickle as a political assassin, not just a freelance terrorist, but a guy with a definite agenda for politics. I mean, for political figures, and a guy who hunts political figures. So yeah, it's just that the unhealth and the derangement of our culture hasn't changed that much in quality, maybe, but it has just shifted its targets from one place to another.
That's what I was going to ask you. Do you see a lot of parallels? And this is what, what Matt Bracken and I were talking about, just, people that are older that have been through, longer down the line and, 70s, 80s, 90s. I mean, I was born in
Yeah, that's me.
78. So, do you see parallels between the 70s and where we're at now? And before you answer that, my thought is, I'm not knowing, but in today's world, you have the access with the phones and the social media, the tools. You have a lot more tools today for more
Hmm.
fuckery than you did in the
Yes, you
70s.
do. And actually, you have even better weapons and uh, better ways to build bombs and just better ways to mess with people. So that's improved a lot, and not in a good way. So that's changed. Probably the biggest change in relation to all that technology is that reality has become a lot more elusive for more people. And what we've been witnessing, and I think what you and I and many other people on your podcast have been observing for the last few years, is that the derangement now seems to be located in the educated elite classes more than the uneducated or less educated working classes. And that's a new rub because when you can't depend on your thinking class to think clearly, you've got a really tremendous cultural problem, and that's exactly where we're at.
Well, and it touches on the whole golden era of academia is gone, right? The more degrees you have, the
Obliterated. Obliterated. It's like the bomb went off in the Ivy League and all the other elite colleges, and the debris has not even settled from the explosion. It's still floating up there in the slow motion mushroom cloud waiting to rain down on us. But they have lost their authority and their legitimacy almost completely. And their business model is also failing, and it's going to fail more, really severely, when the Trump administration comes in. And they've already announced that they are going to very carefully look at what the federal funds have been going for in these elite universities. And they're going to cut off those federal funds if they're going for things that are harmful to our society and to our country. So places like Harvard and the University of Michigan and Berkeley, they're going to lose their funding for a lot of the things that end up being expressed one way or another as disordering forces in our culture. Things like DEI and all of this never-ending Marxism and sexual derangement and all the stuff we're paying for to be systematically packaged in the universities and then passed along to another level of organizations that disseminate it in the public. And I'm speaking of, the non-governmental organizations, the think tanks, the various activist organizations. And they're not going to get this packaged fuckery anymore, and they're not going to be able to transmit it to the rest of us. And that will also probably affect the transmission line between the universities and the NGOs and the orgs and the media. And the media, in its way, in its own way, the mainstream media is failing badly too now. And their business model is breaking. And the business model of the university is also related, of course, to the college loan racket, which is probably going to be interrupted, I think, by Mr. Trump and his people. I think we're going to see an end to federal guarantees for student loans, and that will probably put an end to a great deal of the student lending. And so there are very long chains of transmission and supply of ideas and programs and ideologies and products of the mind that are going to be interrupted now, and it's probably a good thing. And people will have to develop their ideas in a different way for a while.
Yeah, can you imagine if there was no student loans available? I mean, the cost of college would plummet.
Yeah, the cost of college went up in the first place because of the student loan racket. It enabled the rise of tuition from, the tuition at my college when I went there was $500 a year at a SUNY college, State University of New York. I went to one of their third-rate campuses because I was a third-rate high school student, maybe even fourth rate. And I couldn't get into a decent college. And it cost $500 a year. I must add, I had a pretty good time in college, and my college was not bad because at the time, in 1966 and onward, Governor Nelson Rockefeller was putting immense amounts of money into the SUNY system in New York. And they had a faculty hiring spree while I was there, and a building spree that was really out of this world. So, they were creating new departments and new facilities every month. And it was kind of exciting. And I had good professors, even at my third-rate college or fourth-rate college. That wasn't too terrible. But this is a different time. College then was $500 a year. I could pay for that easily one way or another. And now if college, even at a state university, not uncommonly, $30,000 a year. And of course, at an Ivy League place, it would be like, $80,000, $90,000 now. So I don't know how someone pays $30,000 for a SUNY education or University of Michigan or
Kent State, where I went, is 30,000. I was told.
there you go.
Ohio University, 30,000.
QED. Yeah.
How do you claw your way out of that? You're over 100,000 in the hole for an undergrad degree. Marketing.
Well, look,
or finance.
a lot of this stuff happened really rapidly. The development of that racket was quick. It took about 15 years, maybe in all, for it to fully effloresce and turn into the evil racket that it did. And so it was a new thing, and the forces that are swirling around it are also pretty new. The idiocy of the fields of study, like, the gender studies and the, lesbian studies and race studies and identity studies and, all that stupidness is relatively new. And it kind of fed into the college loan racket because there were a lot of people who had, well, many, many young people have no idea what they're even interested in. And they end up kind of gravitating to these fashionable new idea courses. And then they end up having found themselves investing in an education that is meaningless and worthless. And they spent $200,000 doing it. And the whole thing ends up being kind of a farcical tragedy. But all of that is a relatively new development. And so the consequences are you have a large population of people, under 30 who are burdened with all this debt. Joe Biden comes along and makes an attempt to buy them off by excusing their debt. And then the Supreme Court rules that he's not allowed to do that. And so, the debt problem is still there, really, and hasn't been solved. And yet the recognition is there also that the degrees are worthless and that, there's a guy named Peter Turchin, who's kind of a social theorist historian, who has a theory that he calls elite overproduction. Have you heard that?
Mm-mm.
Excuse me. Elite overproduction just means you're sending too many people into colleges and universities to be trained for jobs that are never going to be there for them. And that's the predicament that we're in. I'm sorry, I got to have a little drink of
vodka.
No, it's not vodka, actually. It's my secret health drink that I sip all morning long. Anyway, that's how I see it, and it's far from resolution. And the resolution, I think, is ultimately going to be that a lot of colleges are going to dry up and blow away, and a lot of the really bigger ones that are well endowed are going to contract significantly, and their profile is going to be lower. And they're going to have to jettison a lot of the crapola that they picked up over recent years and not try to peddle it anymore.
I don't know if you've heard Matt Smith I've had on, who is in Uruguay, and
he's the one guy I missed.
Oh, he's fantastic. I did one with him and Matt Bracken too a couple of weeks ago. But he's got him and Doug Casey are writing a book with his son Maxim, who
I've heard about that in that podcast. Yeah,
The Preparation.
I guess I heard it.
Yeah, the book,
I heard about it.
Yeah, it's called The Preparation, and I tell you, I've talked to Matt about it a few times. I talked to Maxim about his son, and he went to EMT school for whatever it was, 3 months, 4 months, and then from there it led him to he got an opportunity to help to fight wildfires in Oregon.
This is Matt's kid?
Yeah, Maxim.
Okay.
And I think the next thing he's going to do, I believe, is going to learn how to sail. And then he's also been spending time on his father's ranch learning how to become a farmer, a rancher. He learned how to harvest a cow. Like
Hmm.
all these little things, because Matt was like, yeah, I didn't, the traditional college route. I wasn't going to, I'd rather allocate that money so he can acquire skills, life
Yeah, very
skills.
smart idea. And you say Doug Casey is writing that?
Yeah, it's Doug, Matt, and his son Maxim.
Okay. Because Doug's a pretty good writer too. He's written some good novels.
I can't wait to see when that. I can't wait to read that book because I think going to college today, not that I'm on spend time on the campuses, but as a man, young man, I think it's very difficult, and I think it's very difficult to find success when you graduate for the amount of debt that you acquire.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I thought the college was just rather silly. I enjoyed it a lot because first of all, I was there during the absolute heart of the hippie explosion. I was there. I got there in '66. I did the 5-year plan because I kind of messed up my senior year and
Did you
I
go to
had to do it
Woodstock, Jim?
over.
Did you go to Woodstock?
No, my roommate went to Woodstock and I took over his job while he was at Woodstock. He had a job delivering bundles of the Rochester, New York paper, the newspaper. And he used to go to some distribution place and fill up his car with bundles of newspapers and take them around to all these country post offices for, for being distributed in the morning. And so I took over his job for 5 days while he went. I had no desire to go to Woodstock. It was, I don't like crowds. I could see that it was going to be probably a pretty unpleasant experience. And I avoided it. Yep, successfully. But so I was there during that period. And, when I first went to register for classes in my freshman year, I was kind of astonished that, you only had to register for 3 classes on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and 2 classes on Tuesday and Thursday. And after coming out of high school, and I went to a high school that was particularly difficult because I went to the High School of Music and Art in New York. We had a regular academic load all day long, plus 2 hours of studio on each end of that, or on one end of it. So, a regular academic load and 2 extra hours in the studio made for a really long day in school. And I go up to college and I realize, oh, I have to be in school for 2 hours a day here? That's absurd. What do you do the rest of the time? Because studying would have never occurred to me. So I thought it was a joke. And of course, because the hippie thing was going on, basically it was just, going around chasing girls and that was pretty much it. Well, in my case, by the time I became a sophomore, I was a theater major and I was spending a lot of time every day, 6 days a week in rehearsal, sometimes 7 days. So that did kind of preoccupy me. And, at that point, I realized I did have something to do. And it might have been worthwhile if I had gone into the theater as a profession, but I didn't. I went into journalism instead.
Any regrets on that? The path that you
Not at
chose?
all, not really. No, I'm glad I didn't go into showbiz. I tried it the summer after I graduated. I was a little bit at loose ends, and a friend of mine was running a summer theater in the Finger Lakes, and he asked me to come up and direct a Midsummer Night's Dream, and I did a pretty good job. But he came in, him and his partner came in the night of my technical rehearsals, which is like the last thing you do before a dress rehearsal. The technical rehearsal, you're setting the lights and the levels and the sound and stuff like that. And they came into the theater and said, well, we don't have enough money to continue, but if you want to stick around for the rest of the summer and put this play on, you're welcome to do that. And all the actors went home. So, that was the end of my theater career. And, I spent about the next 3 or 4 months holed up back in my college town writing short stories and trying to get them published. And then I went to Boston and started writing for the hippie newspapers.
Yeah, what a career, man. I mean, and I've said this to you before, but you end up going to work for Rolling Stone, and I mean those short videos that you were writing for. That I
Yeah,
said,
yeah. Well, I've said this before, but in case any young person's interested, because their experience will be different now, very different. But when I was starting out and I was a young adult, and I was a journalist. The programming, if you had literary aspirations, was to write novels. That was kind of the ultimate goal. And I got about as far in journalism as I thought I was going to get, which was Rolling Stone at age 26. And I didn't like it there. And I decided that's exactly where I'm going to make a conscious decision to drop out and write these novels that I'm destined to write. Uh, and I did. So I was Rolling Stone was located in San Francisco at the time. They moved to New York about 2 years later. So I had a motorcycle out there because it was just the best way to get around that city. Um, it didn't rain much in San Francisco except in February, and the rest of the year it was pretty dry. So it was a great way to get around. And I tried having a car for a couple of months. I bought this beater from the receptionist at Rolling Stone. It was just a dreadful car. Um, and it got towed like 2 or 3 times. And each time it got towed, it cost me $100. So I said, fuck this. And I bought a used motorcycle from a colonel down in the Presidio Army base. And it was great. I discovered I never did motorcycling when I was a teenager or a college kid. And I really, it was like a great revelation of how easy it is, what a wonderful way it is to get around a city. And then finally, when I quit Rolling Stone, I rode the motorcycle back across country and, came back east and embarked on this career being a novelist. It took me about 2 years to publish my first novel. And in the meantime, I worked as a bartender and I worked as an aide in the mental health unit of the local hospital. And, but I picked a good town to live in. I lived in Saratoga Springs, New York, which was one of the few small towns in America that had a real vitality. And it was, set in a region that is a very beautiful region of mountains and farms. And I had a great time. And I pumped out a lot of work. So I systematically pumped out one novel after another for about 12, 15 years. And then, by kind of a stroke of fate, I got invited to write some pieces for the New York Times Magazine. And that got me back into writing nonfiction books. And I wrote the nonfiction books that were quite successful for me. The Geography of Nowhere and The Long Emergency and some of the ones in between.
They're still
And
still selling
so
today
that,
too. The books are still
yeah,
selling.
they are. The Geography of Nowhere, which was about the fiasco of suburban development and, where really it fit into American history, is still a kind of a cult classic in the architecture schools, which I'm very grateful for. But the situation hasn't changed hardly at all. It's just amplified. It's just gotten worse. The suburban living arrangement has only grown, and both in the crappiness of it and the extent of it, and its oppressiveness to our economic life. And it's still an enormous problem that we can't find our way out of it at the moment. And we will eventually when various systems that we depend on start to wobble. And some of them are now. As we've discussed before, I won't rehash this too much, but, the whole car thing is failing in a surprising way that I didn't expect, and maybe a lot of other observers didn't expect. It's failing now on the financial end of the system rather than on the resource and fuel ends of the system. It's no longer about the price of oil. It's about the fact that the middle class is so battered that they're becoming increasingly less credit worthy and unable to buy cars the way they're used to buying cars on installment loans. And the cars too have gotten so expensive, and inflation is so bad that that's exacerbated the situation. And so the automobile, the happy motoring system, as I like to call it, is now failing on that basis before we even got into trouble with the oil, really.
Yeah, you can't. $35,000 today gets you doesn't get you much in terms of a new car.
Yeah, that's pretty base, isn't it? I mean, I was on the lot a few weeks ago. I had to take my Toyota in for servicing, and I was just walking around the lot looking at the trucks, and they're like $100,000. $80,000. I wish I knew the difference between an $80,000 and $100,000 truck. It's a little bit hard for me to imagine what it is even. I mean, I suppose it's some level of amenity that, but I don't know what it would be. Heated seats, who knows? But I don't know how people can pay for them. It's just out of this world.
And you just extend the loan out. I don't know how long you
Yeah,
can
but
do it now.
they've run out of room to run these tricks where they game the loaning system to enable people to make the loans. And the way they did it for many years was just to extend the length of the term of the loan, right? So you get like an 8-year loan for a car. But then it got to the point where they were giving out 8-year loans for used cars, for cars whose basic value would be completely gone after the first 3 years of the loan. So the collateral would be worthless. To repossess that car would be pointless. And then I heard Peter Schiff, the economic commentator, financial commentator, on his show about a year or so ago. He said, I know he did say this. I wasn't imagining it. He said, people who were getting their cars repoed were, 3 weeks later, were getting offers from car dealers for new loans for used cars. So that's how deep the desperation was.
How the system has been able to hold together for as long as it has is just incredible to me because and I've said this a million times, probably said it to you. These people are very creative, man. They just keep coming up with new ways to kick this can down the road a little bit longer.
Yeah, they do. You can't deny that. But, it's gotten to be like some kind of a Houdini levitation trick now. I don't see how it can go on a whole lot longer. And you're hearing an awful lot of chatter out there, a lot of rumblings of panic about the bond markets and the debt problem and how it is going to affect the stock markets and the overvaluation of the stock markets and the overvaluation of the housing markets. The whole thing is just a fiasco. So, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if there were parties out there who were doing all they could to crash the system for the benefit of Mr. Trump.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody literally last night on the phone about Apple. And I said, how is this company worth as much as it is? Because they sell phones and computers, and they haven't done anything revolutionary in a long time. And his response was, well, the apps. I said, well, yeah, but it can't be that. It's one of the biggest companies in the world. Based on what? Same with NVIDIA is another one. They don't even make their own chips.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Apple does have this. What they have been pretty good at doing is managing to keep revenue stream going from the subscription stuff. Apple Music, Apple Cloud, Apple whatever, Apple Movies or Apple TV. That has kept their revenues up without a whole lot of new product. And but you think, as far as product goes, you think that they would sort of be getting to a saturation point. And they do have their tricks to try to force you to get a new phone. They have ways of telling your phone to run its battery down so that you'll think that the battery is gone, when in fact you can reset it. There are ways to reset it. The kind of secret hidden code that you can access, but all that stuff is very abstruse. And so Apple seems to be doing, what they can, but trillions of dollars, I don't know.
Yeah, and these
Their
iPhones
valuations do seem insane.
and these iPhones are $1,200, $1,300 now.
Yeah. Yeah. So there are a lot of people who think we're heading into an actual hard depression now. And I could see that happening. I could see a combination of circumstances being really pretty dire. But we just got to kind of stand by and As they famously say, no one ever sees this coming,
You
although you can see it coming from 1,000 miles away.
you remind me, Matt Bracken said, and I meant to look this up. I don't know if I could find anything on it, but he's like, nobody predicted the Great Depression the week before.
Well, I don't know if that's exactly true, but certainly whatever the animal spirits of the time were, they were pretty outrageous. And then there was that guy. Who was that guy who said, we've reached a permanent plateau of prosperity? It was some official. And that was the kind of defining mood of the moment in 1929. And then all of a sudden, kaboom. But anybody who understood the operation of Wall Street in 1929 and the operation of things like bucket shops, which were basically swindling operations for selling stock, and anybody who understood that probably could have seen it coming. Certainly, Joe Kennedy saw it coming, JFK's father, because he got out of the market when the legend is he got out of the market when a shoeshine boy gave him a stock tip. And he realized, okay, this is it. If the shoeshine boys are now transmitting stock tips, then it can't be good. So he got out with all of his fortune, and a few other people did too.
And that's what you're seeing now, right? With Warren Buffett. I mean, hell, he's got how much cash sitting on the sideline?
And he's certainly not doing it surreptitiously. He's doing it out there in plain sight. He turns around every 5 minutes and says, well, I got another $1 billion I went to cash on. Why'd you do that, Warren? Well, basically, I don't trust the stock markets. Okay, thanks. That's pretty clear.
And what about the whole Bitcoin phenomenon? I mean, I've had people on that are obviously huge Bitcoin enthusiasts.
Yeah.
And hearing this and watching it right now, it reminds me of when I moved here in 2006 with the whole real estate. Everybody was buying real estate. Everybody and their brother was buying real estate. And that's what I feel like watching this Bitcoin right now. Everybody's got a Hawk Tui girl has a coin, and
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It depends on how much faith you have in the idea that you can monetize math, because that's what's going on. They're monetizing math and using it through the medium of electricity, right? So the idea is, you have this formula, this algorithm for setting in motion certain quantities of transactions on computers involving the selection of magical numbers. And you just set the computers to churning and churning and churning and churning. And, one theory is that it is merely the electrical power that represents the work, the electrical power that represents the work involved that reflects the value of the Bitcoin. So that all of this churn of computers is using so many megawatts of electricity that Bitcoin must be worth something. Okay, that's the theory. And there are kind of subsidiary theories to that about how the mining actually works and how the sort of profit rewards are allocated to those who successfully do the mining in a certain way, and et cetera, et cetera. And then these Bitcoins are birthed out of that process. But like I said, it really seems to come down to monetizing math through electricity. And to me, the weak point is the electricity, because if you start to live in a society that's experiencing outages or any problem with the electric grid, you don't have any access to Bitcoin. You can't buy or sell it or dump it or spend it or use it. And that's going to reflect on its worth. So another theory that I've heard in the last few days, maybe on your show, I don't know, is that actually, I think it was on McIlvaney's podcast, that because Mr. Trump set in motion this idea that the Fed was going to get into, not the Fed, the federal government was going to get into Bitcoin and establish a Bitcoin reserve, that idea that he expressed some weeks ago ended up pumping the price of Bitcoin above $100,000 at the time. And now there's kind of a growing recognition that might not actually happen, and so Bitcoin is kind of steadily dropping into the lower 90s now, and with the expectation that it may fall quite a bit below that again. So the whole thing's largely mysterious, but I think as a bottom line to all of that, you can suppose that living in a bubblicious age where everything is a bubble, that all kinds of speculations would come along that people could buy into and that would develop a story behind them. And this seems to be exactly the right candidate for that. This is primarily a speculation. It's not a money. It doesn't have the characteristics of money, which are a medium of exchange and a store of value and an index of value of the price of things. So it doesn't really have those characteristics. It's not easy to spend and transact with. It's not a good store of value because its value goes up and down so drastically, so severely from month to month. And same thing with an index of the price or the value of things. So it's not a money. What is it? It's a speculation. And it's a speculation that is based on math and electricity.
Yeah, and you know, gold will never fail you. Well, no, I shouldn't say gold will never fail you, but you know, that is what seems to be, through the test of time, gold, right?
Yeah, and for certain reasons, it doesn't have any counterparty risks. It's not the collateral for some debt. Uh, you own the gold and you own the value of what it is. Now, to some extent, you have to grant that gold is a human artifact. Okay? It has been created by social human beings in societies and civilizations. It is a technology in a way, but it's a pretty basic technology. It does have value to humans apart from its moneyness, as does silver. And it seems to have enduring value. Everything that we can tell about it is that its value is enduring. And people make the argument that if you get into a really dire kind of social catastrophe, like, a really terrible war or something like that, you can't eat your gold. And that's true. You can't eat your gold, but even in times of war, you can probably transact in it. I have no doubt that if you were in Nazi Germany in the last days of the Third Reich in April of 1945, and you were in some war zone there that was, the Russians are pushing through and things are in complete disarray, if you had a gold coin, you'd still be able to buy a ham, even under those conditions. So I don't buy the argument that, you can't eat the gold. So, yeah, I think it's basically a pretty sound investment. And its value has really not changed that much over the millennia. You can calculate probably that the price of gold could buy you a good men's suit at any moment in history. It could buy you a good aristocrat's toga in ancient Rome. It could buy you at $20 an ounce. It could buy you a decent suit at Sears Roebuck in 1922. And at $2,500 an ounce, it can buy you a decent suit at Ralph Lauren in 2025. So, the value of it is relative to the products and commodities out there. But it is, when all is said and done, an excellent index of value. It's a good it's a good way of transacting. Well, it's not a good, excuse me, it's not easy to transact in gold bars or coins because, they're so valuable that you can't make change for them easily. But it is a medium of exchange that does have value that way. And it's a good store of value. So it has all the qualities of money. The thing about precious metals, of course, is that gold, when you have gold and silver, basically, And gold tends to be hoarded, and silver tends to be the circulating currency if you're in a hard currency society. And that gets back to Gresham's law. You know, Gresham, I guess, was an 18th century figure who commented on the behavior of money. And Gresham's law is that bad money drives out good money, or that money of lesser value drives out money of higher value. The money of higher value is hoarded, and the money of lesser value is the money that circulates for transactions. And that's exactly what you get with gold and silver. You know, when you're in a bimetal kind of society, and that's what you got in the United States to some extent with gold and silver, where, you know, basically silver coin was what was mainly transacted in. And we had gold coins too, but, you know, gold was largely, you know, stored and hoarded. So that's what I think about that.
So I know we wanted to carve out a little bit of time to talk about movies, and
Oh yeah, movies.
you want to talk about superhero movies, Star
I hate
Wars,
them. They're so stupid.
Indiana Jones.
And,
You want
and
to
I
talk
know that
about?
there are a lot of people who take them absolutely seriously. And I can understand the reason why, because that is a kind of mind that enjoys, you know, mythic literature and just, you know, myth itself as a form of psychology or psychological illustration. And so I understand why Tommy Longo would be attracted to The Dark Knight and things like that. I happen not to be. My attitude about it is pretty simple. Um, you know, drama and comedy for human consumption, shall we say, you know, stories that people want to see or would pay to see, they really derive from human beings trying to solve human problems, the problems of the human condition, of being here on Earth, of living in a particular kind of society, right? And it's interesting enough. You know, people have enough interesting and curious powers just from being humans, from being as super intelligent as we seem to be, and from having access to the many tools of society and civilization that we have created. We're interesting enough so that to see us working out our problems of society and civilization and individual our individual lives, you know, that's pretty interesting. But we've arrived at a point where that's not good enough. You know, that for some reason our problems are so overwhelming that only superheroes with superpowers can solve them. And I find that to be kind of a childish, silly idea. You know, it's really just another kind of superstition. And I would prefer an art form that is not so much based on superstition as, you know, grounded in human behavior. Although, look, there are certainly many layers of understanding in the human condition and the human mind. And also in the depiction of it in literature and movies and plays and other things that depict dramatic action. And you know, we do have archetypal relationships between things with things which are archetypes, whether they are, you know, archetypal figures like, you know, daddy or the warrior or the hero or the virgin or the mother or, you know, any of those archetypal figures. So we operate at that level, but we also need to operate at the level of, you know, we are humans in a recognizable society, you know, whether it is Napoleonic France or the America of Joe Biden. And I would like to see some drama or comedy about that rather than see Batman cavorting around in his cape, you know, and having his Batman psychodramas in the basement of his Batman Batcave. I'd rather see I'd rather see Joaquin Phoenix in an apartment trying to figure out his relationship with his wife. So that's how I feel about the hero movies. Now I have another beef with another kind of movie, which is I'm not sure how you'd categorize this, but both types of movies, the space mythos movies of George Lucas and the Ring movies of Peter Jackson, which are, among the most popular movies ever of all time. And I find them preposterous and nearly unwatchable.
You always felt that way?
Yeah, I hated the Star Wars from the very first one with, Han Solo and Princess Leia. Hated them ever since. I've only seen about three or four. I saw maybe the first three of them, and then I gave up on them altogether. And the only reason I saw the first three is because, back in the 80s and 90s, I was still accustomed to going to the movies. When a major movie came out, I went and saw it, even if it was something that I thought was basically going to be stupid. So I saw everything I could. Now, one of the problems with George Lucas is that he's a really lousy storyteller. And Peter Jackson has the same problem with the Ring movies. And here's what they do. They drag a character on stage, and the character declaims about events that happened off screen X number of years ago to X numbers of people. And they think that that's dramatic action. Well, it's not dramatic action. It's exposition. And exposition has its place, but not so much in cinema. The place of exposition is literature, written literature. And even on the page, it has very limited duties to the story. Mostly what you need to have in movies, especially, but also in novels, is dramatic action. You need dramatic velocity, where the action is moving forward with some force. And in these movies, these superhero movies and these Ring movies and the space movies, the only time the action actually moves forward kinetically is when there's some kind of violent stuff going on in the screen, when things are blowing up and people are having fights and there are wars and armies are meeting on some archetypal battlefield. You don't get the dramatic action between the characters, so you're not really getting that kind of character development or story development. And I just find it's just the crudest mistake to make in storytelling. And they make it. Now, the compensations for the viewers of these movies, the space movies and the Ring movies, is the visual extravaganza that comes with it. You get this feast for the eyes of strange-looking creatures and things moving in ways that we can't really do on Earth, and all that CGI stuff, and basically film magic, right? So that compensates for the fact that Peter Jackson can't tell a story really. He'll just have some albino dwarf come out on stage and say, well, this happened 4 millennia ago in Saragonville, and we had this terrible problem, and this is blah, blah, blah. And it goes on forever. And it bores me to death. To me, it's transparently a failure of storytelling. So that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, and I think Peter Jackson, he got exposed in King Kong. That was one I was really hoping would be a interesting take from him, and it was not he did.
No, it was all CGI. Yeah. Giant spiders, and they had to resort to the most extravagant visual stuff in order to compensate for the fact that the guy just couldn't tell a story. So it happens all the time. In fact, the only good part of that movie is the beginning, where you're back in 1930s New York before the guys get on the boat. And interestingly, to me, that part of the remake of King Kong was much longer and more detailed than in the original King Kong, which, went right to the island, after like the first 10 minutes or so. And, but, They had great production value in Peter Jackson's things, great sets for 1930s New York. And but I don't think the guy can tell a story.
You don't hear from him. You don't hear much from him since. Really, he hasn't done a lot of films. He went back and did those
No.
Hobbits, which I never saw. And yeah. Well, the other thing is too. In my years of watching films, there's just no leading actors or actresses anymore. Like I was watching Pretty Woman not that long
Hmm.
ago. There's no
Hmm.
Julia Roberts like person out there.
Well, there probably are, but they've got them all, preoccupied and engaged in playing boss girls and super women with superpowers, and so they're not playing just women. I think what you're describing is you'd like to see a movie star who's just playing a person, not playing, a third degree removed idea of a person. So yeah. Um, I'm sure they could find them. I think that there are actually quite a few charismatic actors out there. One of my favorites is Tom Hardy, the English actor. Have you ever seen that movie, Legend?
I haven't. I haven't seen that or Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy.
Well, Legend is just a fantastic movie. And it is mostly, a movie that is a clash of personalities. And, it's about English gangsters. Um, in particular, the Cray brothers, Ronnie and Reggie, who are identical twins. And it takes place in London around the time of the Beatles and Carnaby Street when these guys were running the mob, or it's about their rise in the mob and to run the mob in London. And the remarkable thing about Tom Hardy in this movie is he plays identical twins who are really quite different in their mannerisms and behavior. And he does a fabulous job of differentiating between the two personalities that, would supposed to be identical, but they're not. And it's just a great movie. And then there's another one, and I don't remember the name of this one. It's a Guy Ritchie movie. It's also an English gangster movie.
Snatch.
Um, Pardon?
Snatch.
It's not Snatch. It's another one, and I don't remember the name of it. It's about a kid who's kind of an English rock star slash gangster, and his family, and the English mob scene in contemporary England. And it's also, a fabulous clash of personalities, and it's got a lot of violence in it, but it's not like overwhelming violence, and it's mostly not, CGI stuff. And I saw the remake of not the remake. I saw once again the Coen brothers' No Country for Old Men just the other night. And that is
Love that. I
a
love that movie.
that's a movie about, human beings in action across a very sinister terrain of dramatic action, um, under very dire human circumstances. But it's a totally human movie. It's not about anything super. Well, you could argue that the villain Anton Chigurh has some super normal qualities about him. That's the guy who's played by Javier Bardem, the killer. But he's not, explicitly a superhero with a cape or wings or, transformative powers into a Wolverine or anything. But that's a movie about people, and it's riveting because almost everything in the movie is dramatic action happening before you that, it's not exposition. There isn't a character just standing there saying, well, this happened 3 months ago in West Texas, blah, 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 blah. They show you everything. You're being shown stuff, not told stuff at every step along the way. And you're being shown the stuff happening with tremendous expertise for choreographing it. And that's why the Coen brothers are great.
Yeah, the thing about that movie too, I think we and I talked about this before. What stands out to me was the fact that the start of it was about the $2 million, And then by the end of the movie, you forgot about it. It was irrelevant. And it was just showing how
Yeah,
the world is, how it's just tough on people as they get older. And then Harvey Bardem, you assume he kills the wife because when he walks out of the house, he checks his shoes to see if there's blood on it, gets in a car
exactly.
accident, and then he just walks down the street, and that was it. Like,
No, no, that isn't it.
did I
Because I
miss
saw it
it?
the other night. No, he gets in the car, and after that happens, he's driving down a very quiet, conventional suburban street in some Texas city, and he seems to be in a state of complete tranquility after doing this deed, this murder. And so he goes through an intersection, some guy T-bones him and injures him grievously. He's got such a bad broken leg that his or arm, I forget which one it is, that the bone is visibly
Yep.
sticking out of it.
It was the arm because he made the kid give him his shirt. He paid him for the shirt.
Yeah, yeah. And then there's some, business with the kids on the bicycle, and eventually kind of walks away from the scene gravely injured, and that's the end of the movie.
What did that symbolize then? Him walking off in the street like that? Do you know?
Well, we already know that he's pretty good at doctoring himself. So, you draw your own conclusions and, maybe he bought the farm on that one and, maybe he's going to lie low for 3 months and, get medical attention or not, or fix himself up or not. But there's a lot for you to think about in that ending.
I was watching Josh Brolin. He was doing the media circuit and saw part of it with Rogan. And man, he's a guy. I mean, I've been following him since I was a kid, right, with the
Yeah.
Goonies but then he comes back, No Country for Old Men. I love Sicario 1 and 2. I don't know if you like those. Did you see
Yeah, I
those?
saw them both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I saw him in some other discussion with another guy. And the host was making the point, and Josh Brolin was reinforcing it that, he's very careful about what he selects now to do for movies. He really wants to do good material. So yeah, he's an actor who has a lot of charisma. He can do a lot of different kind of stuff. He's versatile. He was great in Hail Caesar as the studio exec, and he was just fine in the Coen's version of True Grit. And yeah, he's a charismatic actor.
American Gangster, I liked him in as well.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a pretty old movie. He was a lot younger then. He played a cop. An American Gangster was a Michael Mann movie, I think.
Ridley Scott.
Oh, Ridley Scott? Okay. Proven to be a capable movie maker, though he has his stumbles. And I think I saw his last movie, which was really bad. I
Did
forgot
you see
what it was.
Gladiator 2? He did Gladiator 2.
No, no. And there was one before that that I didn't admire very much. But he has his successes and failures, but he's capable of being pretty good. Michael Mann is also an excellent director, although he's not that much on the scene anymore. He did most famously The Last of the Mohicans with Daniel Day-Lewis, and he did that movie Heat with Pacino and De Niro, and
Great movie. His
that's a great
stories
movie.
are a little clunky, but they're fantastic.
And also he also shows you exactly how to make a movie that is about dramatic action, not about exposition and telling people shit. He doesn't have to labor through the backstory. His movies just proceed in action. And when I say action, I don't mean car chases necessarily. I mean, even just a conversation, a significant conversation between two characters that leads somewhere, that leads to some change in circumstances for the characters involved.
Yeah, did you see the Nosferatu? You gonna watch that one?
No, I just noticed the other day that it came out because uh, I was looking to see the new Bob Dylan movie, and I did go see it. And I thought it was quite good. It was is a biopic about Bob Dylan's early years in 1961 to 65, and You know, that seems like the Stone Age now, but um, it was a very faithful depiction of the circumstances, I thought. As little as I know about Bob, because I didn't live his life and I wasn't his pal. And the kid who played him really did a great job of understanding his body language and his mannerisms, as well as being able to sing his songs very faithfully and play the guitar very well. He learned how to do that, and so I thought it was a great job. And I did notice that Nosferatu opened. Nosferatu originally was a horror movie made during the German expressionist period of the 1920s, the Weimar Republic and all that. And they had a pretty lively film industry, but it was, as it's come down to us, it's best known for its cinematic expressionism, which is a kind of a tuned up psychological volume of kind of psychosis. They were drawn to the subject of mental disorder, and a lot of the movies of the period represent mental disorder, and a lot of it has to do with the post-war temper of post-World War I Germany. A culture that had been kind of swindled, felt that it was swindled by the Versailles Treaty and the end of the First World War, felt cheated, was very angry, had gone through a ruinous inflation. And inflation can be really deadly to a society. It can wreck so many relationships and social and economic relationships and just really batter up a society. And so German Expressionism largely expressed the psychological disorder of the society itself. And Nosferatu was a early vampire movie. I guess the director, I think, was Fritz Lang. I'm not sure. But it's very spooky. And the vampire himself is a much spookier character than Dracula ended up being a few years later, with Bela Lugosi in his evening dress and his boiled shirt and his tie. And this Nosferatu in the Fritz Lang production is this character that looks literally like a half rat, half human, with these long fingers and claws. And he must have been quite scary to the viewing audience of 1922 or whenever it came out. I haven't seen the new one. There's probably a lot to work with there. Unfortunately, the Dracula story has been retold so many times since then. And each time they seem to, kind of flop in one way or another. Even the great Francis Coppola, I believe, did a remake of Dracula in the 80s or 90s.
I never saw it. Bram Stoker's
with
Dracula.
Gary Oldman as Dracula and Winona Ryder as the young lady who ends up being victimized by him. And it ended up being such a preposterous movie. It was visually very rich, but this story was really quite preposterous as he told it, and kind of a flop. Goldman was great. I really did think he did a good job. And there were some other touches. The production values were good. It was a good depiction of, I guess, Edwardian London, something like that, I think was the idea.
So will you go see this?
I don't think so. I think I'm going to wait for it to stream. I'm just not that interested in seeing it on the silver screen.
Yeah, I usually those aren't my kind of movies, but the reviews have been so good for it that
Are they? That's a different story.
Well, I follow the Critical Drinker. Ever talk to you about him? He's on YouTube.
No, I don't. I don't know who that is.
He's a Scottish film reviewer, and he's more on the conservative side too. Like he's always making fun of the woke DEI.
Yay.
I'll send you the review that he did of it. But he was saying how he said that I don't know if he says the best movie of the year, but he's like it's ending on a strong note. And he said Bill Skarsgård plays the Dracula, right? Is it Dracula?
Nosferatu.
Nosferatu.
Yeah,
But that's the character's name, Nosferatu, the
I
villain.
believe so.
Okay, so Bill Skarsgård is playing, and he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "The Crow," because he did the Crow remake. He goes, "That movie was so awful that now this actor is ending it on such a good note." And he goes, "And I'll advise people, don't watch the original. The original's on YouTube." He's like, "Don't watch it if you're going to watch the new one because it follows it pretty closely, I guess."
The original Nosferatu from the German version.
Well, there's that one, and I saw on YouTube in 1979. Was there a
Oh,
1979
it's
version?
possible there was a remake. I'm not aware of it offhand.
But I think he was talking about in comparison to 1922, the original. But he said, don't
Yeah.
watch the original if you're going to plan on going and seeing this one because it'll spoil it for you. But he was saying that the movie was so well done this time around because the director who did The Lighthouse, which I never saw,
I didn't see that either. That's William Dafoe,
and Robert
right?
Pattinson, The Witch I never saw, and I never saw Northman.
I never saw any of those.
But this director is so into the like historical like doing peace movies, and he makes it as accurate as possible. And he said, or accurate as he can, because he's a historian or something. But he said the musical score is perfect, the visuals of it, and he said the story is just fantastic. So I'm like, I want to see it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm going to look for that. Where do I find this guy?
I'll
Who's
send
that
it to
guy?
you. I'll email it to you.
Please,
I'll email
please
his
send me the
review.
link.
I look at all of his. I watch all of his. He'll review shows. He'll review.
I don't read movie reviews anymore, except once in a while in the New York Times. I do subscribe to the New York Times, despite the fact that I dump on it constantly. But I feel like, doing what I do in this world, I got to keep on top of it. So I do read their movie reviews. And I didn't see the Nosferatu review.
Yeah, he's kind of my go-to because he'll even do stuff like I remember when he did Sound of Freedom because he's like, yeah, this isn't a movie I typically would have went and saw, but he's like, when the people ask the drinker, because he always sounds drunk when he does his reviews. He's got sunglasses, his Scottish accent. He's like, they ask the drinker will oblige. And so, but
The drinker will oblige.
even the reviews of that, I mean, I would have seen it anyway, but he was like, talking what a great movie it was. And he does shows too, and he'll do episode by episode. And then he has a panel called The Critical Drinker After Hours, where they'll be on there for like 3 hours breaking down, like going through stuff.
Now that you mention all this, I really miss film culture and film criticism around that. Because, film is a great art form. It's in the process in America of destroying itself. We may have passed the critical point now that, DEI is being so discredited and they're being kind of forced to cut it out. But I don't know if the industry is going to recover from it because they have all of these other issues, these union issues and the cost of making movies in California, et cetera, et cetera. I do remain convinced that you could probably make a decent movie now off of a cell phone if you were a film student and forced to do it. You probably could. Just sheer video and, shooting the scenes and shooting the master shots and shooting the other shots and putting them together. But so far, the alt Hollywood film industry isn't that impressive right now. In fact, the indie world was more impressive 10 years ago than it is now because they're having such terrible problems with distribution. Theatrical exhibition is becoming such a loser. And streaming now has just become a wilderness of shit. You scroll through the offerings on Netflix and you feel like you're lost in some, Okefenokee swamp of meaninglessness. And I wonder how these movies got green lighted to get made. Because all of them cost a lot of money. Movie production's expensive. And every single one of them went through that process where, somebody sat in a boardroom with a whole bunch of other people and said, well, should we make this movie or not? And here's the good points, here are the bad points. And, let's make it. Green light. I don't know how they get that green light. It just puzzles me. So there it is.
Where can people find you? Oh, when's your next podcast and who you got lined up?
Oh, I did a podcast with a railroad guy about reviving the American railroad system. His name was Bill Moyer, not to be confused with the old PBS show guy, Bill Moyers, who before that was Lyndon Johnson's press secretary back in the 60s. So Bill Moyer is a youngish guy out in Washington, younger than me, and he's an advocate and an activist for reviving the rail system in America. I'm editing it now. Hope to get it out tomorrow, next day. How about you? Who's next up for you?
You're next.
Oh, okay. Who's after me?
Tomorrow I'm doing her name Mimi, blanking on her last name, and Marco, who runs Independence Arc Farm. So we're kicking off
good.
World Carnivore Month. I had Mimi on a few months ago, and she's been doing carnivore for almost 2 years. She's in her 70s, works out a ton, lifts weights, walks
How's
upwards.
she look?
She looks fantastic. She looks absolutely fantastic. She walks upwards of 10 miles.
At a time or a day?
At a time. I mean, she does it maybe 3 days a week.
That's a long fucking walk.
Yeah.
And I like to walk. How are you doing? Are you back on the meat?
I just started back again yesterday because January is World Carnivore Month. So it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I just I did that last year. I did it for 2 months. This year, I mean, I think you got to do more than a month to really see the benefits from it. But I noticed it. I mean, in 2 weeks of doing it, I noticed a huge change.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I'm half tempted to do that myself right now.
You know, everybody has their thing of what they like, what they don't like. From my experience, if you follow an intermittent fast of 6 to 8 hour window of eating, and then, carnivore. I mean, I drink black coffee and I eat avocados. But if you do like a larger amount of meat consumption and stay away from the processed stuff, the sugars, the weight just comes off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's for dinner tonight?
I'll go get some. When I'm done here with you, I'll eat this afternoon, and then I won't eat again. That'll be it. So I'll have like a pound and a half.
Half a buffalo or what?
Yeah, I'll get like a pound and a half of like flank steak or some lamb or something.
Oh, good for you. Do you buy like I know you buy from your sponsor, right? But do you sometimes buy right out of the supermarket?
Yeah, sometimes I'll do that. Like I'll go get some lamb, or if I want some bacon or something. But
because there's been some scary shit out in the last few days about parties who want to inject the cattle with mRNA vaccine to fuck people up and to put them off eating meat. To create a situation where they won't want to eat meat.
Yeah,
I wonder about that.
Yeah, I don't trust any. I mean, trying to hit us every which way they can these days, right?
So do you buy organic?
Yeah, sometimes or just pasture raised, but most of the time I do that once in a while, but mostly it's the meat from my sponsor, from Independence Arc Farm. So a chuck roast or sirloin or cook it in my cast iron.
Do they send you stuff in bulk, like, half a cow or something?
Yeah, it's just pounds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's I'm really thankful for them. So yeah, we're gonna do a conversation tomorrow, the three of us. So it'll be good.
Yeah, I still have quite a bit of beef in my freezer from my pal Kevin up the road, who raises about 3 or 4 cows and sells like quarter shares.
I mean, you got to know where you're getting your food from these days too, right? Yeah. I mean, so it's
It's spooky. It's getting increasingly spooky. Even the vegetables, you really wonder what is going in there. Between the microplastic and the glyphosate and other stuff. It's kind of sketchy.
Do you so what's your outlook for 2025, Jim? In a short version.
Outlook, I published it on my website, which is what is it? It's Kunstler.com. That's all. KUNSTLER.com. It's lodged on Substack, but we arranged things so I'm using my old domain website to get there. And so Kunstler.com brings you up to my Substack, which is a complete website. My forecast is on an item on the navigation bar on the top, and you can get to my forecast for 25 and also the previous ones. As I say in my own forecast, forecasting is a mug's game. It's very easy to be wrong about a lot of things, but this year's is pretty, I think, it's a little early to tell. Day two of 2025. I think it's maybe better than average. I'm looking forward to the new regime. As I said in the beginning, I think that a lot of the anxiety and bizarre thinking and behavior in the air right now is coming from inhabiting this liminal zone before the inauguration. And things might change after that. We may become more sane. My blog, Clusterfuck Nation, comes out every Monday and every Friday at kunstler.com. And so I'll have a new one up tomorrow. And it comes out about 10 o'clock in the morning Eastern time.
As always, thank you for doing this. We got to get another one with you and Dave on soon. Those are
Sure.
real fan favorites of the Coffee and a Mic.
Well, it's always a pleasure to be with you, Mike. Have a good haunch of beef tonight.
Mic drop.